I can't reach it. It's right here.
All right, we're back. It is COMP123. That's programming 2, and it's the summer 2016 semester at Centennial. And we can really feel the summer today because not many people are here today. But week 10, part 1 of our broadcast. So I want to continue with a couple things from last day, but I also want to take a look at our new assignment that I've kind of put together. It's up online today, right? So let's take a look. So we've been talking about Windows Forms, right? And with Windows Forms, you can build a UI, which makes it a little bit more interesting than just using console applications, I would think, right? So what I want you to do in this assignment is build a UI. Build a UI, and you're going to build another kind of calculator. Instead of building a calculator the way we've been building one, I want you to build an actual functional BMI calculator. So that's body mass index. Okay, it's very, very simple. It's worth 15% of your final mark though, and it's due in a couple weeks. So right now we're sitting at week 10. This will be due week 12. Your current assignments, that's assignment 4 and 5. So the practice assignment for arrays and all that stuff, and your IO stuff is all due this Friday, if I'm not wrong, right? So, and most of you haven't handed it in. I've seen up online, like there's only, I think 3 people have handed it in totally for both assignments. Remember, the array assignment is optional to help you boost your marks for the people who didn't do so well in the exam, which is most of you. I'm just saying. You know, and but it gives you an opportunity to make that up. So this one here is a brand new one. Again, it's due August 5th. Can you believe it? It's in August already, right? A couple weeks, August 5th, and again, it's worth 15% of your final mark. All right. So what are you going to build? You're going to build this BMI calculator, and if you want to know what it looks like, if you want to look at any other apps that are out there right now, BMI calculator stuff. If I just type in BMI calculator app, right, as an example, for ones that are already out there, you can see some examples of apps that are out there. Now, I don't want you to make it any complicated app like this, but let's take a look at some examples that are out there already. Example, here's one: your height and your weight, calculate BMI, and then some kind of scale, right? Seems easy, but you know what? The devil's always in the details, right? So really, it's that simple. You're going to make a very simple UI. We're going to talk about the details of what I want in your application. So let's take a look at this. So again, using Windows Forms, create a BMI calculator, the weight and height, right? Depending on what you choose, the user can choose imperial or metric units. So they can say, for example, I want it in, you know, pounds and inches. So pounds for weight, inches for height, right? Or they can choose, you know, instead of pounds and inches, they can choose weight in kilograms and height in meters. All right, that's the other option. Okay, and then what you want to calculate and display the user's body mass index, the calculated body mass index, inside of a text box. That's what you're going to be doing, right? The app should also display the following information in the Department of Health and Human Services, National Institutes of Health, and from the U.S., which is, if the BMI scale, again, if you're less than 18.5, then the user is considered underweight, right? That kind of thing. If it's between 18.5 and 24.9 is normal, and so on. And what you want to do is use this scale so that way you can kind of inform the user of where they sit. BMI is usually a calculator of a high level health. If you think about it, if your body mass index is not so good, it's just another health app to help you, you know, kind of understand where you sit. Here's the calculation. So if you're going to do it, again, depending on if they're doing weight in pounds or height in inches, as an example, or weight in kilograms and height in meters, the calculation's right here. All right, so you don't have to go and hunt for it. It's right here. This is the calculation you have to make, you have to put together. And then you want to use this calculation when you make your app work. Let's talk about the details. 2 parts. 1 part. Modify the following properties of the BMI calculator form as follows. Size property 320 by 480. We've been doing 320 by 480 last day, right? So you're going to make an app that kind of fits a phone, right? We're not making a phone app, but I want you to emulate the fact that you're making an app that looks like a phone. Why? Because in the future, if you do any kind of thing with Android or Swift or whatever, you'll be limited that big, right? You won't have, you know, a big form that you're going to make. And this is kind of emulating this mobile form that you're going to make, right? So size, font, form, border style, maximize box, all the stuff we talked about last time, it's there. All the things you have to do, you have to modify for this one, right? Here are the UI controls. So you're going to need to have some kind of table layout, like we've kind of put together, right? A radio button, this is new, and we're going to talk about radio buttons today, that basically toggle between imperial or metric, all right? So when I toggle between imperial or metric, somewhere in my form, in the background, I got to keep track of which unit system I'm using. Am I using imperial? Am I using metric? Right, and that's going to affect your calculation. So you're going to, depending on if it's imperial or metric, you're going to calculate differently, just like I showed you above, right? So if it's imperial, again, it's going to be down up here, weight in pounds and height in inches. And if it's metric, it's down here, right? So a label control with a text value of my height, right? And then a text box control that allows you to input his or her height in inches or meters, depending on the radio button control setting. Here's the note here. Ensure that the appropriate input validation techniques are used to limit the user's entry to numeric data only for this control, right? Because what if the user enters like an A? It'll crash the, the control, right? So we have to kind of think about, user input validation for these controls, right? Here's another one, a label control with a text value of my weight. So there's my height and my weight, right? And then same kind of idea, a control that allows you to enter in pounds or kilograms depending on which unit type you've chosen, the user's chosen, and ensure that the appropriate input validation techniques are used for this one, right? A BMI text box control. So you're basically going to make another text box control that displays the final BMI, whatever the calculation is. It's going to be a place where it's going to be calculated finally, right? And then again, this control will be disabled so that users can't input their BMI manually. It's going to be calculated. It's a calculated control, right? And again, I also say, please make sure that you have background and foreground colors adjusted appropriately, so it doesn't look like it's grayed out. All right, that's what I want to put there. A button control with a text value of calculate BMI, right? So click the button, calculates BMI based on the inputs, right? But what if you don't have any input? And that's why I asked you have to have input validation for those buttons. If they're 0, 0, or if the person hasn't entered anything, you got to prompt the user to say, please enter valid controls. And you may have to have additional labels, either that are hidden or underneath the actual controls. We're going to talk about that today, where they kind of appear if the user hasn't entered proper stuff into his inputs. Okay. So that he calculates, again, if it's imperial or metric, depending on the radio button control. And then a multi-line text box that displays the user BMI results as per the BMI scale. So what I mean by that is, are you underweight? Are you normal? Are you overweight? You kind of take this BMI scale, right, and highlight the one that belongs to the user, right? So you're going to show this BMI scale inside your multi-line text box, right? And one of these lines is going to be highlighted, right? Now there's different ways to do these things, right? Some people have just put the actual line itself. That's okay. If you can't figure out how to do all these things and just highlight one line, that's okay too. I'll leave it that way. So just put in, like, for example, normal. Let's say, for example, if you fall between 18.5 and 24.9, you just put normal, right? Normal between 18.5 and 24.9. That's the BMI scale result. Right? And you kind of display that in another separate text box, right? Okay, solution structure. Again, make sure that your form is named BMI calculator.cs, right? So it's got to have a special name. And the Windows form and all attached UI controls must have appropriate variable names with the following format: control name and then UI control type, which is what I've kind of shown you already. So for example, if I put a button control that does my calculate BMI button, it's going to be called calculate BMI button. Don't make it button 1, okay? That's not acceptable, all right? So all your controls have to have appropriate names. And make sure they're all in upper camel case. So that means, like, all words are capitalized inside the variable. Okay, that's what I'm looking for. Again, all private class member variables, instance variables use underscores where you can. Internal documentation, make sure you have your author's name, author's header, all that stuff like we normally have inside your C# file for your form, all right, because you need to do that. And then share your files on GitHub. Here are some optional features if you want to try this out on your own, right? Include a splash screen. Comes up, and then after 3 seconds, it kind of shows your logo and some stuff about the BMI calculator, and then disappears, like you would normally have if you're running a real app. Kind of comes up and then disappears, and your app actually comes up after that. A colorful progress bar that changes in proportion to the user's BMI. You put that in there. So if the user's BMI is 29, then it'll go 29 points, right? Or whatever it's going to be, right? These are just to test you to see if you can do extra stuff. A reset button. God, everyone should be able to do this one. That resets the form controls. You can get 2 bonus points for that. Number keys from 0 to 9 and a backspace button that limit the user's entry to improve input validation. Woohoo! So not only are you going to do those controls, but some of the stuff we're doing today with the calculator, you're going to create another little area with input buttons that can all fit nicely and tidy inside that 320 by 480 little box that you're making, right? That limit the user's input. So that way it's almost like a custom keyboard that you use just for this control. Why? Because that way, but then you wouldn't be able to allow the user to actually type inside those text boxes at all. The text boxes are just, they're all disabled at that point, right? Which is totally acceptable. And I would give you 6 bonus marks for that one because it's extra work. You have to kind of get the controls, do what we just did with the calculator app, kind of, get that input, use those controls as input into your box and so on. Lots of stuff to do there. So that's why I gave you 6 bonus marks. So lots of opportunity for bonus in this one, okay? And I'm hoping that you can strive for it. Some people won't. Okay, there's your rubric. Again, the whole thing is worth 48. Actually, it's incorrect. 54 marks. It should say it up on your rubric anyway. Up on top here, 54 marks. There it is. With a total of 15% of your final grade. All right, so lots of stuff to do. It's due a couple weeks out, so it's not like it's due next week or anything like that. You have a couple weeks to kind of try this out, make it work. And it's your first UI, kind of app with a UI that you're building, right? Now, the great thing about this, remember I told you about I like to use a calculator, some kind of calculator as my hello world when I build mobile applications, right? Once you've done this one on Windows, and if I give you another one with Java, right? Whether you're using Spring, whether you're using Swing, sorry, whether you're using some other kind of interface that you're going to put together. For example, the Android interface, you're building an Android app, or maybe you're going to do it with iOS, or maybe you're going to do it with the web, right? Whatever it is, it's very similar. The details around making it are very similar. So once you've done it once, you can do it, you can replicate this over. That's why I'm saying this would be almost like I'm giving you a chance to create your Hello World app for any platform from a UI perspective. Once you know how to do a Hello World app in this thing, you can do it in any other platform. Because once you start learning the controls, let's say, for example, I'm going to do it on iOS. I need to learn all the things to do to make this app happen on iOS, right? Which is, in turn, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to figure it out. You're going to build something. And then now I know how to do iOS apps. Simple UI control, as an example, right? Now, I make it sound simpler than it is because all this takes work, time, research, patience, all that kind of stuff when you build a new app. So this is your first kind of go at, at a UI. Make sure also to remember that whenever I enter data into UI controls, for example, in text boxes, they're all strings. I have to convert them all from strings into the appropriate data type, okay? And that, again, it doesn't matter just if you can listen to what I'm telling you. It doesn't matter which kind of input or any kind of, iOS, Android, whatever. It's all strings, and you convert them into whatever data type you want afterwards. Same thing, when you're going back out, you got to reconvert them back to strings when you display them in your controls. Okay. Any questions around this app that you're building? It's one of the first UIs, again, that you're building. Remember that for your final exam, you're going to build a UI. All right. This is just going to happen. This is what this whole second half is all about, right? So you need to get practice, and this is going to help you do well in your final exam. Okay. So please, please, please do not miss this assignment, or else you'll be in big trouble for your exam. And there's no makeup for the exam, right? Once you're done, you're done. Right. So it's not like I can give you another assignment like assignment number 4 as a bonus, right? All right, so that's due a couple weeks out. Again, we're going to kind of get into that a little bit more as we speak. In the past, I've done other kinds of apps, and every time I do this, another iteration of this course, I'll change the app to make it something else, make it something more interesting. Back to our calculator. So we had a problem last time when we were doing our calculator, right? We tried to make it work, and the calculations were wrong. Did anyone figure out what was the problem? By the way, I knew what the problems were, but I wanted to kind of see if you guys could figure it out. And I'm guessing no one knows what the problems are because you guys didn't look, right? Let's take a look what we got. So if I run this thing, you know what it is? Oh, okay. Oh, no, you're going to help me. Why don't you come up here and help me out? No? All right. So let's take a look. So again, a very simple calculator. If I click 7 plus 7, I get 14. That's good. That's good. That's excellent. If I clear though and I go 7 plus 7, right, I get 0. That's a problem. So something's wrong when I go back and hit the equal sign again. I'm not really clearing, or maybe there's a clear sign. I don't know what I'm doing. Here's the other thing. If I run it again, here's the other thing now. Remember, I'm testing. I'm in the process of testing my app, right? 7 plus 2 should be 9, right? Equals 14. That's the problem. Something's not right. It's not calculating right. We're going to figure out why it's not calculating right. These are easy things to fix, all right? But I'm leaving it as is from last time. I didn't want to fix it without you guys seeing what I'm doing. All right, let's take a look and see how we can fix this problem. First of all, let's take a look at what the calculations are doing. And it's important to note what's happening behind the scenes. Again, my calculator button click. Whenever I click the buttons, we did this last time. You know, as an example, we checked when I click the calculator button, it's one event that handles multiple buttons. So a shared event handler. All right, that's what we've done from last time. So depending on what the button is that's clicked, we can get the button clicked is the number, whether it's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, or whatever. We can get those numbers. We haven't done the decimal point. We got to figure that out today, right, for this little calculator. We also check to see if my string equals, 0, right? If it's 0, if the string equals 0, and I'm being very clear about using the string stuff here, then the result text box, I want to clear the result text box, right? If it's 0, right? So I'm checking to see if it's 0 already, and then if it is, I want to clear it. If it's not, I want to add to it. That's how I do when I concatenate the strings together to make that long line of numbers or whatever, right? So my current result is equal to the result text box. We get the stuff from the result text box and we add it in. If there's nothing there, then we wouldn't add anything, right? And then what we're going to do is add to the result with whatever we've clicked, and that's how we get the numbers. So we build up the numbers. I'm just going to remind you about this. Okay. Here's where we have a problem, right? My result text box.text is equal to 0 when I clear. That's okay. But here, this first operand being 0, that's a problem. Why is this a problem? It shouldn't be 0. It should be, string dot like empty, right? And the reason for it is because somewhere down the line, if I'm not wrong, I'm checking to see if my string is null or empty, right? Once I've done it one time, my string is never null or empty again. So when I click the C button, my string's got to be null or empty. So that means that instead of assigning 0, I got to say string dot empty, right? It's the empty string. Now you might think this is weird that I'm using string instead of like double quotes or whatever, but this is a much better way of doing things. Why? It ensures compatibility between two strings without any kind of finger tapping errors. So string.empty. I'm using the string class to help me out here, the string helper class. Okay. All right. So that's the first thing. So string empty. So now let's see what I get. So I'm going to save this, and then run it, and then see if I get anything different. I'm doing it one step at a time because I know where all my problems are, right? But one step at a time, we're going to get this, and then we're going to talk about this operator click thing, which is also convoluted and wrong. Right, remember, first we make it so it's working, and then we go back and fix it after and make it better. All right, so let's take a look. So 7 plus 2, 14. That's a problem, right? If I click the C button, I can still calculate something, I'm hoping now, right? So that works again. So now I'm actually getting a calculation the second time around. Calculation's wrong, right? But we're still getting a calculation. So that's the first thing. So this fixed that problem. All right, let's talk about the operator click and the equals button and what it does. When I click the operator click event handles any operators that are attached to it. For example, plus, minus, divide, and multiply. So any one of those buttons that are clicked, I'm going to get a type of operator here, right? Right now, all I want to focus on is the plus. But here's what I do. I say, I get the operator clicked, and then basically I say is this active operator, right, is my operator click.text. So I set the active operator already. So the active operator might be plus, as an example, right? Okay, good. If the string is null or empty for this first operand, which it would be now, right, then the first operand is equal to the result text box.text. In other words, whatever that result text box was, right? Originally, whatever I had in there the first time, it's going to take that text. Good. And if the string is null, or the second string is null or empty, right? As an example, with my operator clicked, then I do the same thing. Well, there you go. There's the duplication. So that's where I get like 7 plus 7. Doesn't matter what I do now. It's going to always be equal to 14. If I click 7, I'm always going to get 14 as the answer when I press plus. Right? That's a problem. What I really want to do is this. Right? I want to check to see if my first text box is, if my first operand is empty. If it's not, right, then I want to assign the second operand, right? That's what I want to do, just like I did earlier. So if it's null or empty, the original idea that I had was, hey, check to see if it's empty. If it's not, assign the second one, right? If it's not null or empty. Okay, so the second one gets assigned, right? Let's try this out. So if I put else in here instead of if, we had that problem before where I wasn't getting a calculation. Let's try this out. Let's just do one thing at a time, right? So again, so I check to see if the first one's empty. If it's not, I check to see if the second one is empty, right? Uh-oh, else if. If the second one's not empty, that means that something's wrong. That means that, you know, for me to not get if it's not empty, that means something's still in there somehow, right? We're going to talk about this later on. So if it's empty, then we get this thing happening over here, right? Okay. And then we get the result text box.clear. After we've assigned everything, we clear it up so that we don't, every time we press the operator, right? We got it. But here's the problem with this methodology, right? I go the first button. So I mean, I'm going to show you this, what I'm talking about here from a design perspective. So this is what I want to do. Click the first button. Let's say 1. Click this thing here, plus. I take the first one and it goes into my operand 1, right? Okay, good. Now I click the second button, whatever it is, and then I click equals. That's what I'm supposed to do. So 1 plus 3, as an example, should be 4, right? All right. Well, that means that I never get to this step because the first one has got to be empty, right? I'm doing this just in case I want to do other operators. I want to keep on clicking like 1 or plus, minus, times, divide. I'm kind of thinking ahead when I made this little thing here, right? So it's either empty, and if it's not, then I want to go to the next one because that means that what I want to do is put it in the second operand somehow. This is actually totally wrong, right? If you think about it, I just want to check to see if the first one is empty. Check to see, right? So let's assume for now that the user is only going to press 1 operator, and let's fix this for now. So the first operand is going to be the result text box when I click the operator. Okay, so let's just take this out. And just follow me what I'm doing here, and we'll come back to this later on. Okay. Again, we were very, we were very fast when we did this, and I want to take it back a step because we can always go back and fix this. All right, so that means that the first operand, this is where the first operand just represents a place where I'm storing my first number. Okay, good. Then I press the plus button. All right, so my plus button basically stores the first button. That's all it does. Okay, good. Then I clear the text box. Right? Okay, good. Now I press my second button, and then I click equals. Now this is where this other piece comes in. All right, so I click equals. When I click equals, what it's going to do is going to take the value from the second operand, right down here, and assign it to the the second operand right away. It's going to store the number in the second operand. Let's do this. So before I do any of this first number, second number stuff, the first thing that's going to happen is the second operand. So this type operand, second operand, this one here, is equal to the result text box.text. So result text box. You got to do that first. So the second operand is stored there, right? That's where the second one is stored. Because I've stored the first one already when I click the plus. Now I'm clicking the equals. I stored the second one, right? Okay, now, see these first number, second number stuff? If I'm clicking the equals button, what I really want to do is take the first number and the second button and combine them. Do I have to have these temporary variables? Yeah, I do, right? I certainly do, right? So let's assume, I'm going to get rid of these checks for a second. So let's get rid of these checks. Just bear with me while I do this, because we'll put them back in a second. But I want to prove something to you. All right, so there's my first button. my first number and my second number, I'm just using as temporary holding locations, right, to convert the first operand and the second operand. That's all I'm doing here. And then, depending on what operation is active, the active operator, right? If the active operator is plus, I'm going to do the plus operation. If the active operator is minus, I'm going to do the minus operation, and so on. Okay, let's see if I fix my problem. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the result string and pump it out to the text box, the result text box. So I can do one operation right now. And I'm assuming that the user's not going to do anything weird or try and mess me up. Let's assume that first. All right, so let's just try this out. And then we'll trace it to see what's actually happening if we're still getting an error. All right, let's try this out. So haven't touched anything. 7 plus 3 equals 10. We get an actual operation. Okay, good. Now, when I click the C button, remember we talked about this, it's going to clear the operands, right? But one thing it didn't clear is the active operator. The active operator should be no, because we didn't take into that account. Let's go back. So the clear button, here's the clear button. We changed the result text box to 0 again, and the first operand and the second operand we made it null because that's how it should be. So we clear those values again, and then what we got to do is the active. Here are the other options here. The active operator, which is also a string, should also be set to empty. We shouldn't have an active operator if we click the equals button or the C button, right? Otherwise, what's going to happen is if we click other buttons, the active operator is already there, and then it'll already do the calculation for us. So let's set the active operator to empty as well, as just a safety precaution. So this active operator is equal to string.empty. I'm using, again, the little helper class, string.empty, just to empty out or clear my string. It's a good practice to do that with strings, right? Because we have these properties that already exist. I don't have to type it, and I don't have to make any finger typing errors or assumptions. I know that they're going to be empty. Okay, cool. So this is the second thing that happens. Okay, let's try other calculations without any error checking yet. Okay, let's try this out. So run, and let's try it again. So 7 plus 9, 16, right? So let's try this out. 16, clear. Good. Let's try it again. 7 plus 1 is equal to 8. Good, clear. Now let's try multiplication. 7 times 2 is equal to 14. We're good. Let's try other calculations. 7 times 9, that should be 63, is equal to 63. We're good. Let's try division. Oh boy. 7 divided by 7, we should have 1, right? Equal to 1. That's good. What happens if we go 7 divided by 0, though? Oh, division by 0 error. It's going to break our code. So we have to figure that out. That's one thing we got to fix. Division by 0 can't be allowed. What we can do is if we do that, instead of allowing that to happen, because all we're getting is strings, and if I know that I'm trying to divide by 0, right? So if I take my operator 1 and my operator 2, and if I'm trying to do a division, if my operator 2, my second operand, is 0, I would skip out and say, put inside that box division by 0 error. It's going to actually put it inside the little box saying error division by 0, something like that, right? Because that makes sense to do. So that's one issue that we have to take care of for division. Let's keep testing, though, because we haven't tested all divisions. For example, we don't have this dot button working yet. Well, let's try this out. So if I go 7 divided by 2, right, we only get integers, so we should get 3. Because 7 divided by 2 is 3.5. We don't have the 0.5 in there because we don't do those kind of calculations. All we do is simple calculations without a dot, right? We haven't formulated that yet. Remember, we're only doing integer calculations. We're not doing longs or anything like that. All right. So you might think, again, that the whole idea of the calculator is easy. But the problem is, it seems easy when we make an app, but actually it's very hard. It's very hard because we gotta look at all cases, everything that can possibly happen. And there's tons of cases here. There's tons of options, right? That the user can make a mistake or break our app, right? Let's think about some other cases like that. So if I go click clear, and if I put 7 plus 7 plus 7, right? That's another functionality that we want to get eventually. We won't have that functionality right now. it should be equal to 21. But if I click equals, I'm going to get 14 because if I press plus, this is how it should work. If I've already got something in the operands, operand 1 and operand 2, right, somehow, if I press 7 plus 7, right, once I press the second one and I've got an active operator, it should put the stuff in the second operator, not when I click equals. Let me explain that to you. I did a shortcut to make it work, but up here, where I signed the second operand as result textbox.text, right? We only do that if the first operand is already taken. So if I go 7 plus 7, the second time I press this, every time I press that 7 button, every time I press a button, right? I want to check to see if the second operand is checked, or the first operand is already used. Okay, and that's a problem. Just saying. So how, anyone have any suggestions about how to do this, right? Because look, when I enter the button, here's my calculator buttons, right? So I kind of, put in my buttons. When does it know, right, that I should stop? And that I'm going to enter my stuff inside the active the second operand. The only time it knows is if I press plus, again, another operator, right? Or if I press equals. Plus or equals, okay. If that's true, and when I press the operator click, I should check to see if my first operand, my second operand is already taken. If my second operand is already taken, if I'm pressing another operator, I should do the calculation, whatever the calculation is. If that's true, that means that my equals button, this active operator calculator here, should be a method of its own. So I should extract this method, right? And I can do this calculation either when I do the equals button or when I press the next active operator again, right? So it should show me the next result, whatever that is. And it should take that result, if I'm in that case, that particular case, and store it inside of the first operand and wipe the second operand away. What am I saying by this? Let's do a real calculator example so you can see what I'm talking about. So again, if this real example, I have 7 plus 7, right? Okay, 7 plus 7 plus, I'm going to start clicking equal, I'm clicking plus again. Now I'm getting 14, right? Plus 7 plus 7 plus 7. Now take a look at here, what you can do here. What you could do is you could evaluate this whole thing up here, this whole line of code up here, right? By keeping a history of all the things you pressed, right? So here you're displaying the latest thing that you've done before you do the plus. This is another way of doing it. And then you want to do an evaluation of what I'm putting up here. That's going to save us a lot of time if we have some kind of way of evaluating a string. Let's think about that word that I just said, evaluating a string. Eval. Is there some kind of eval method that allows me to evaluate a string? Well, let's check it out. So I'm just going to close this one down for a second so see that. So I'm going to go string, look it up, string eval, right? C#. Is there such a thing? If it's true, if we can evaluate a string like 3 times 4 plus 2, guess what? We don't need to do all that complicated stuff, right? Yes, you can let C# compiler evaluate it at runtime. That's going to be a way better calculator than we can come up with, and it's going to save us a lot of time. But is there a way of doing it? Is there a function that allows me to calculate everything based on my string? Is there an eval function? There's the event handler. It's going to give me an example of how this works. And what I want to do is I want to take the results of whatever I get, and I want to add the results together. Oh, yeah, this is not really a great one. I have to dig down to find what the answer is. Let's see if there's another one. How can I evaluate a C# expression dynamically? By the way, it does exist in other languages where you can do the eval. Okay. So here's another example on Stack Overflow, right, where we look at it. It says, by using compile on the fly, like this example shows, compile on the fly. Or by using flee, which is for exactly the same reason. Let's take a look at these two things. So this is this example here. And then it gives me a bunch of sources, old way of doing it, right? reference assemblies add, da, 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 things fly out. That's not what I want. I don't want to do it that way because it can be complicated and you want to understand what's happening. Let's see if there's a simpler way of doing it. Just saying. So if we can have some kind of evaluation, right, eval, that would be awesome, right? Fly, to me, this looks like some kind of download, right? That is totally awesome, it says, but it's supposed to be for using the NuGet package manager. I can download this thing called, it's called Flee Fast Lightweight Expression Evaluator, right? That can do it all for me. Nice, but I'm using somebody else's code, right? I don't want to do that. All right, the other way to look at it is look at the string class C# and see what if there's something that helps us out. So let's take a look at the string class. And a lot of times in strings, there is something that helps me evaluate, right? But what I really want to do is see if there's anything out there from a methods perspective that can help me. So compare, I can compare, right? Again, I'm just trying to figure this out. Concat, we've done that before, right? Ends with, equals, we can compare two strings to make sure that they're equal or not. Format, I can format the string and all that kind of stuff, right? And get type, get enumerator, right? I can do all those things. Index of, right? Is null, joins, I can do all those kind of things. Last index. But there is nothing that kind of evaluates a string. By the way, it does exist in other languages, right? That would be awesome if we could have some way of using a string eval or an eval method. The other thing to check is the math class, because math does a lot with C#, right? So if we can't do it with strings, maybe there's a math function that does it all for us, right? That's built in. That's an okay thing to use, right? Okay, let's take a look. So we're going to go back out, and we're going to say math class C#. Again, I want to find a shortcut, some way of doing it without me doing a lot of work, right? I think that's the right way to think about things. I want to do something that's already been done, right? That's the first thing. So absolute value, ceiling, this special functions that will do all these, floor, log, max and mins. It'll calculate the maximum minimums. That can be pretty cool. Power to the power of, rounds, right? It'll round up, round down. We're going to use some of these stuff. The signs, if I want to change the sign of, returns an integer that indicates the sign of an object, and so on. Tangent, truncate, if I want to truncate an object, but it doesn't really do any kind of calculation for me. So we're kind of stuck doing the calculation ourselves. And that's okay. But this is what I want to do. I want to basically do this first number plus second number, first number and minus second number and stuff when I do this. I'm going to convert this into its own method, right, where I take the active operator that's active, take the first number and the second number, and create that answer for me. And it's not going to be just in here and the equals button click. This thing here has to be a separate method that I can call from either the equals button or the the operator click method, because I could do that string of characters that I calculate, right? All right, so that's one thing to do. Let's fix the divide by zero problem. So how can I fix the divide by zero? Well, I can do this. Before I take the result, first number divided by second number, I can check to see if inside this case, this divide case, that the second number, which is the divisor, right, or denominator, if you will, so numerator over denominator, right? Math 101, right? Numerator, denominator, right? So if my denominator is 0, got a problem, right? Should be no division by 0 error, regardless of what I'm doing, whether I'm using, actually it could be infinity if you're using, like we saw before with the with other things. So let me check. So say if in here, my second number, right? My second number is actually been converted now, right? Is equals to 0, right? Then we have a problem, right? We don't want to do result is equal to this, right? If my second number is equal to 0, then we want to pump out a different result. So result then is going to be, we're going to pump it to string or whatever. There's going to be a message that the result text box is going to show something different. So I can actually do the result text box. So result text box, there it is, dot text. I can do this equal to whatever message it is. But the problem is I'm already doing that efficiently down here. Result to toString, right? So, and result is an integer, right now. Remember, we're going to convert that to something else. What if I use a dot operator or whatever, right? Then the result will be slightly different than this, right? Okay. So again, some things to think about to fix. So I want to make sure that the 0, we're going to skip this whole thing, right? And my result string is going to be null, because when I come over here, originally my result is 0, right? My result is 0. So I gotta give it a value, right? I gotta convert or have a message that comes by to basically say that we have a division by 0 thing, and I want to exit out, right? Because it's gonna, every single time it's taking the result text box.text and taking my result and pumping it, toString, right? That's what I'm doing. But what if I give the value some weird number or some kind of flag? I can check to see if I have a division by error happening. So my result text box.text is not going to be result toString. It's going to be division by 0, right? So I could do that. I could say something like, up here, I could create something like this. And I'm just going to put it out there for you guys. String, or a Boolean. Let's make it a Boolean, right? Which is division by 0. Division by 0. We're going to set this division by 0 by default to false. Okay, why? Because I want to check to see if my division by 0 is true. If my division by 0 is true, then we'll pump on something differently than what we're doing here. Okay, let's check this out. So what I'm saying here is division by 0. So this dot division by 0, sorry, division by 0 is equal to true. That's what we're going to say here. If my second number is equal to 0, my division by 0 equals to true. And then it says result is equal to first number divided by second number. Let's leave that as is. Who cares if it says this, right? Now I could make it so that else my result is equal to whatever. I could do that too. So it only calculates it when my second number is not equal to 0, right? So I can do something like this. I can say else, and then inside the else I say, well, then calculate the result. Now this check will save a calculation, which should make things speedier if I'm doing lots and lots of calculations, right? Okay, here's the thing now. This can't be. Result text box.text can't be equal to this result because I'm not getting a result. My result will be 0, right? So it'll come back as 0 if I wanted to do that, right? But what I really want to say is this. If my, division by 0, right, if it's true, then I want to put in result text box.text, right, is equal to, we got to be very careful, division by 0. It's got to fit in there. We got to check to see if this makes sense, right? Division by 0. Otherwise, in most cases, what you're going to have is result text box.text is equal to whatever the result is divided by a toString. By the way, this whole method, like I said, I'm going to extract it into its own method, right? Right now, I'm keeping it the same just to fix my division by 0 problem. One problem at a time. I don't know if this is correct. We'll see if this is right. Let's see how it looks. All right, so let's try this out. So run it. So we'll say 7 divided by 0 equals divided by 0, right? Now here's the problem. I wouldn't be able to do, if this is equal to division by 0, right? If I want to do continuous pressing of my plus button and I got a division by 0, it should stop me. It shouldn't allow me to do a plus. If I go plus here, it'll clear that out, right? And I shouldn't be able to do another, it would just be an error, right? It should stop me from doing those kind of things. By the way, in real life, right? So let's pull up the actual calc. If I go 7 divided by 0, what did I get? I get cannot divide by 0. And if I go plus 3, it's not going to allow me to do this until I clear the error. So until the error is cleared, it won't continue. But that's a global function. That's something that belongs to the whole class, not to that method, right? So again, we have something we're building. So let's think about how we can solve that problem, right? So we're saying something like this. We're saying division by 0 is equal to true, right? Well, yeah, that's true. But if I got a division by 0 or some kind of error, I should have an error flag that prevents me from doing pluses or whatever. So I gotta remember that. I gotta need an error flag. I could, for now, so I can remember, I could put an error flag in a property up here that's an error. And if my error, if I have an active error, then I can't do a calculation. All right, so let's try this out. So I should be able to do something like this. I should go to prop. And if my active error is true, right, which is a bool type, and I call this active error, I'm just keeping track if there's an error or not. All right. So I initialize my components. Remember, I can also initialize other stuff in here too. In my calculator constructor, I can do whatever initialization I want, right? Right now, there's nothing really initialized, right? Notice that I have my clear button and all this kind of stuff. And with my clear button, it does all this other stuff, right? My clear button should set my this.active active error, right? It should set this equal to false, right? Because I should be able to clear my active error if I have such a thing. But my active error should actually be set to false by default, right? Because otherwise, how do I test for it, right? There is no default for my active error, right? So here's my active error. So I could do something like this in my public calculator constructor. When this thing is constructed, I could set stuff up when the form comes up. Yeah, I could do that. But there's actually another thing we can do. The form itself has what we call a life cycle, right? When the form is drawn, when something happens with the form. So I can have two things. I can have control events, like when I click on a control or whatever, or a change of control. And I can also have form events, when the form actually comes up, when the form clears, when the form changes or whatever. Let's use that as an example. So I'm going to go back to my form itself. I'm going to click on my Solution Explorer and then put up my properties. And I'm going to click on my form. And notice that even my form has some events. Here's some events that come with the form. Load, my form load event. So when the form loads, I want some stuff to be initialized. And this is the place that I would put all my initialized stuff, with my form load event, right? Again, there's other things too that I can certainly try. For example, there might be a form event like that. If my form is being painted, if it's being drawn, while it's being drawn, I can do something. Right? These are all the different kinds of events that I can listen for that can happen when my form is coming up. But the one I want is load, which is the most common one. Notice that it highlights this load as the most common one. So let's double click on this one. Okay, now this is something different. Notice that it says calculator load. So when my calculator loads, this event triggers, right? And what I want to do here is every time it loads, I want to set up some basic things, right? I want to initialize some stuff. One thing I want to definitely initialize is my error. I want to say that active error, right, has got to be equal to false. So when my form loads, active error gets cleared, right? And I can actually initialize a lot of variables this way if I want to. For example, I have all these variables right now, active operator, first operand, all this kind of stuff. I want to be able to do those kind of things. And guess what it looks like? It looks like this, right? It looks like all this, my clear button click event. Well, shouldn't I just call my clear button click event? And you can do that, right? How can I call an event from an event? Well, I can do one of these. I can go this dot clear button click event. Here it is. And I got to pass in two things: the object, which I'm going to pass along, right, as well as, which is sender, and I also want to pass in E. Yeah. Calculator. Right? You click on the actual calculator, the background of the form itself, right? Click on the form. And then when you click on the lightning bolt, it'll have the load event. The load event only occurs for the form itself, the container that it contains all the objects, right? All right, so what am I saying here? Let's go back to this. So what I'm doing is I'm calling an event, the clear button click event, because it already has everything I want when my calculator loads. This way I don't duplicate code. Right? Because here's my clear button click event up here. Here's this thing. And why would I duplicate this again? I might as well just call this when it gets loaded. Let's see if this works, first of all. So I'm going to kind of save this one and then Let's see if it's giving me some kind of error. Oh, good. So it clears everything. My active stuff is cleared. And I've actually called, notice that even the button is highlighted. The C is actually been called already. The clear event has been called. That's a really good thing to note. So if I can call different button events, right, I can do it programmatically and not wait for the user to click something. What I can do is I can simulate, read this as test, buttons that I click to produce a result. That's a great way of creating a test project to test what my output's going to be. So if I want to create tests to test my calculator, I can simulate events by calling the event that I want. All right, let's just kind of cancel this out. So what I really want to say is the division by error should work. Now, so if I go 7 divided by, I should get divide by 0, right? Now again, I could maybe make this smaller. I could do it so that if I click the plus button again, it'll stop, right? And how do I do that? I can check to see if there's an active error. Again, we're taking one thing at a time, one problem at a time. So it won't allow me to do anything else. I can't click equals and I can't click plus or any other operator if I have an active error. I got to clear that active error, right? So how do I do that again? And again, this is the way I want you to kind of think about all these problems, right? So my operator, I got to check to see if my right? What I'm going to do is, because it's an operator click, I'm going to just avoid doing all this stuff if I have an active problem. It's going to just ignore it all. So how could I do that? Now, I'm not even going to assign variables, nothing, right? Why? It prevents me from creating additional memory allocation, like allocating any extra memory until I clear my error, right? It stops everything from happening, basically. So I say if not, right? I go this dot active error. So if I don't have an active error, that's what the not means. I can also say if this active error is equal to false, right? Same thing. It's another way of writing it. This active error is equal to false, right? I could say this. If it's false, then I want to do all this stuff, right? I want to do all this stuff here. However, if it's true, right, then I don't want to do anything. So I want to clear the active error. So I won't be allowed to do this stuff until my active error is cleared. I got to do it for this operator click as well as the equals button click. All this stuff has to be avoided if I have an active error. So let's just put all this stuff in that box. Well, so if this dot active error is equal to false, if it's true, that if there's no active error, then I want to do all this stuff. I'm putting all this stuff in there. I'm going to follow me what I'm saying here. I know it's kind of weird and convoluted for now, but we're just trying to prevent problems, right? I have to clear the active error. Right. There it is. I just put all that stuff inside this if statement. Again, you can instead of saying if active error is equal to false, you could say if not active error, not meaning the exclamation sign. It kind of reverses, right? It reverses whatever the sign is, or if it's true, it makes it false. If it's false, it makes it true. That's what the not does, right? But in this case, this is just as clear. If active error is equal to false, then there's no active error. Let's continue calculating. That's what it's saying. All right. Well, let's try this out now. So if I press play, and if I go 7, there's no active error. I can type, right? Plus, it clears it because there's no active error, right? 7 is equal to 14, right? Clear. If I go 7 divided by 0, though, there's an active error. And if I try 7, I can do that. I got to stop that from happening too, right? So I can't do anything. If there's an active error, right, I can't even do a number, right? So that's a problem. Let's go back. By the way, hopefully someone will come up and say something in a second, right? Same thing here. So there's no active error here. Can't be active error here. What about calculator? No, calculator load. This doesn't matter about that because there won't be a calculator load thing. Operator click. I can't do that. This I got to do this too, right? So I got to say, well, if there's an active error, I can't even click a button. So if this dot active error is equal to false, I got to do it up here too, because if there's an active error, I don't want anyone clicking any buttons. Take all this stuff, here, and I don't even want variables being created if there's an active error. I want the variables to be nothing. There's an active error, you can't do anything. Done. You're done until you clear it. Let's try this out. So again, I've just put around my calculator button .click event. I'm doing that. Let's try it. So 7 divided by 0 equals 2 divided by 0. If I click on a button, oh man, what happened? It should stop me from doing the active error. How about plus? Still works. How come? Man, if active error is equal to false, it does that, right? Well, I set the active error, no? Right? When I did my divide by 0, didn't I set the active error? No, I didn't. I got to set it here, either here or in here. One of those two things. It can't clear by itself. So division by 0, where I say if division by 0 is true, this is what calculates the thing. But it's an active error, right? Any by the way, I can have more than this. Division by 0 is only one error that I can have. I could have the numbers too long error. Like if I could try and put in too many numbers, it's going to say error, right? So any active error. That's why I can't just do division by 0. So what I want to do is, if it's true, the result text box divide by 0, and then I want to set this active error, right, to true, right? This is the first time I set it to true, so now it should work. I know, guys, I'm sorry to really belabor the point, some of the thing, but this is the way it works, right? So 7 divided by 0. Again, we got 0. Now if I type 9 or anything else, or multiply or anything like this, until I type this, I can't continue, which is how it should work. So we've solved that problem. Okay, so active error is done. Okay, let's solve the problem with the backspace before I add the dot, right? And then we haven't added any kind of ongoing calculation of stuff yet. That's way later, right? We're going to do that later. But let's talk about this backspace. So how does the backspace work, right? Well, if I click 8 and I click backspace, it should if it's 8's the only number, it should turn it to 0. If I click 8, 9 and click this backspace, it just takes off the last one. But if there's only one character left, right? I should be able to backspace and it should go to 0. Yeah? So that's the way it should work. That's the backspace, how it should work. Okay, so how do I truncate or get rid of the last character in a string? Uh-oh, man, I'm talking strings again. People are going to be freaked out when I talk strings, right? Strings are arrays, right? I like your thinking, right? But how do I do that? Because a string is an array, and can I make a substring, right? Can I make a substring so that the string is gone? Chop the last, thing off a string. How do I do that? How do I remove the last character from a string? I only want the first, when the last character gets removed every single time. String is not a list. String is an array, array-like, has characters. It's a character array, right? And I keep on adding characters. When I change my string, actually what I'm doing is I'm reassigning what's in my string to whatever it is, right? So let's first click the button. So I want to make this its own event because it has its own functionality. So it can't share functionality with anything else. So double click. So here's my back button click event. So what does it do? It takes the current result text, right? And if the result text length is equal to 1, right? It changes the result text text box.text to 0. If the result text length, the length of the text is equal to 1, only one character, right? So that means that even if it's 0, it'll make it 0 again, right? So if result text box.text length, right, is equal to 0, if it's true, if it's equal to 1, can't be 0. It's never 0. If it's equal to 1, then result text box.text, right, is equal to, we're going to assign a 0. Here's something else we could do. We could have, but clear is not what we want to do. We just want a backspace. Backspace doesn't clear. Backspace just gets rid of characters. Because, for example, what if we're doing a calculation? I made the wrong thing. I'm saying 35 times 43, and I type 430. I don't want to kill my calculation. I just want to backspace so it changes the result text box.text to something else, right? If it's the length is 1. If it's anything else, if it never can be 0, But if it's greater than 1, if it's greater than 1, and if it's 0, it'll ignore it. Like, for example, if there's nothing in there because we've pressed the plus operator, press the backspace, won't do anything, right? Only does something when the text is 1. Let's check out if it's just the text is 1. See if that works. So 1 character long. Let's try this out. So here it is, right? And what I want to do here is I want to press, 7, and I press the backspace, and it becomes 0. So that works, right? But if I press 7, 8, and press the backspace, it does nothing, right? Because we haven't programmed that part up. All right, so is there anyone that can suggest what's the next thing to do? And no one suggested anything so far, so I don't expect anything, I'll start pointing at people, and maybe some people have some ideas. How about you? Do you have any ideas what to do? I got a long string of characters. I want to chop the last character off. What do I do? Substring. Okay, I could do a substring. Anyone else? Remember, we had all these different things. Yes. Remove what? Remove string? Remove, right? The length of the string minus 1. Right. So that's, you're removing that character from the string. So whatever the string name is, dot remove. And then what do you want to remove from the string? The index that you want to remove from. Right? Let's see if that works. I like that. So we'll say else if it's something else. Right? Now here's the problem. It can't be else, because if I just do else, that means even if it's blank, let's condense a possibility, right? Like, for example, if I've already pressed the plus operator or the minus operator, it doesn't have a value right now. That's the way our calculator works, right? So that means it'll try and remove something that doesn't exist, right? So what I want to do is else if result text box.text is greater than 1, right? I got to be very specific here. If result text box.text is greater than 1, right? And that's not the text, but the length of the text. Length is just the length of the string, dot length. It's greater than 1. Then what we want to do is we want to say result text box dot text dot remove, and then we want to say, well, what's the start index? Result text box dot text dot length, right? Minus 1. So if the length is, as an example, 5 characters, right? Remember, if we think about the array, array started, we start getting at 0. So if I want to get rid of an element that's the 5th element, right? It's actually 4, right? Because it starts counting 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the 5th element, right? Then we can get rid of it. So that's why we look at the length, and then we minus 1, and that's where we remove an object from the string. The remove is actually a string method to remove something. And this should work. Let's try this out. So it's going to remove the last element from the string. This is nice, if it works. Let's try it out. I'm just saying, right? So I'm going to try 7, 8. Click backspace. Right? Didn't work. It's clear. 7. That works. 7, 8, 9. Backspace. Didn't work. Could it be that my operator is wrong? So result text box.text.length is greater than 1. Well, how do we check to see if that is? I can always do a debug statement. This is something you can do. So you do a debug .writeLine. I've tried this before, right? Oh, this one. Debug.writeLine. And we can say something like, result text box. Results text box greater than 1, right? We know we got there. So just a debug, so see what we did that. So let's try this out. So run, and then we go here, and then we go kind of something like 7, 8. Watch down here, and then we say. So we know the result text box, so it knows that, but our function is wrong, right? Your idea is right, but I can't do that on the text of the text box. I got to create another string, temporary string, because I can't destroy the original string. It returns another string. That's what it does, right? Then I got to assign that to the original string that held by the text box. Then it'll work, all right? Now this could be a really long, really long thing. I'll show you what I'm talking about here, because this whole thing returns a string. The remove returns a string, right? The remove returns a new string in which all the characters in the current instance, beginning at the specified position and continuing through the last position, have been deleted, right? So I'm starting off at remove everything from the last position on, right? So this removes a string. So we're going to assign this to result textbox.text, right? So it's going to be long. So I'm going to kind of show you one thing. And by the way, there's different ways of writing this. You could definitely create separate variables, like temporary variable, like saying, you know, result text box length, you know, is equal to result text box dot text dot length. You could do that, and then make a temporary string, you know, that you're subtracting. But the easiest thing to do is just call it result text box right dot text is equal to this. Because what I'm doing is I'm removing from the original text box, and I'm using the length, removing this and assigning it back to the text box, right? Otherwise, I don't assign nothing. I'm just getting, it's going to go to the bit bucket in the sky. It's returning something to nowhere, right? Because when I put the remove method on there, it returns a string. That's all it does. It doesn't do anything else. It doesn't change the value of the original text in the text box. We can never do that unless I specifically tell it to, which is what I'm doing now. All right, so let's check this out. So I don't need this anymore because I know it's coming here, so we can get rid of this debug. And let's run this thing and see if it works. All right, so 7, 8. Yes, yes, right? Well, so this is good. This is good, right? Let's see if I can keep doing one at a time. We're good. We're golden, right? Thank you for that. Make sense? So we've got that functionality going. Every time we add functionality, we've been adding functionality to all these things. And I think this is a great place to take a small break because we've done everything for this simple calculator to work. We haven't got multiple calculations working, and that's what we're going to do in the second half. All right, so let's take a short break and come back. When we come back, we're going to finish this calculator off and make it perfect.